Talk Show. Recorded live.
These are provisions, broadly and specifically with regards to infrastructure, that Republicans have traditionally supported broadly.
I suspect that one of the really big surges in the market for housing going forward is going to be the immigrant population.
But I don't, as a president, have the authority to go, if our national security is threatened, then you do it properly.
I would remind you that extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. And let me remind you also that moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue.
This is how liberty dies, by thunderous applause.
Welcome to Liberty Cat Talk Live. This is your host, Todd Andrew Barnett, and his co-host, James Landreth Jr. Hey, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to Liberty Cat Talk Live. We are now on the air. This is a special episode of LCTL, and we are doing a very special episode because it's on a very important subject that normally we don't discuss on the show. And I did send out a notice to Jim, that is Jim Landreth Jr., my partner in crime on the show, to participate. Whether he shows up or not is another story in itself, and that remains to be seen. But other than that, I just want to point out that this is a very, very touchy, very sensitive subject, and we're going to be discussing this on the air, and we're going to probably take calls because two of our interview guests are the central focus of why they're here and what the subject is all about. I just want to remind my listeners to wear your liberty caps. We are freeing ourselves from the control of the state. We are freeing ourselves from the control of the Republicans and Democrats. We're fighting them tooth and nail all the time, every day, no excuses. Plain and simple. Okay, so I just want to let everybody know that the number to call into the show is 724-444-744. Once again, it's 724-444-7444. The call ID number is 91679, and then pound sign. You can put in your cell phone number, your basically what amounts to your 9-digit cell phone number, or you can make a 10-digit, but you don't have to. You can actually dial 1 and then pound, and then you can call in. So, okay, we are going to have my two guests unmute their microphones. Go ahead. And she is a very good friend of mine in the Liberty Movement. She is very strong and vocal in her ideas. She's an author and very much of a very big activist. She's also involved with this particular group that's very important and dear to her heart. I think it's a very, like I said, the subject we're going to be talking tonight is a very touchy and sensitive subject. Please welcome my very good friend from last Saturday's show, Dawn Eckel. Dawn, you with us?
Yeah, I am, Todd.
Okay, thank you for coming on the air with us. And also on the air with her is the president of this group. It's called Survivors of Institutional Abuse, and it's a very excellent 501c3 nonprofit group that deals with the subject of institutional abuse with survivors who were in homes when they were during their youths and pretty much their young adult lives. Please welcome my very good friend, Jodie Hobbs. Jodie, you with us?
Yes, Todd. Thanks for having me.
Oh, no problem.
Hi, Jodie.
Hi, Dawn.
Since you two know each other very well, it's going to be a very interesting discussion tonight. And for any, like I said, anybody who wants to call in, please do. Any of the survivors who are interested in calling to the show, please do so. I'm sure people will be listening, and we're going to be fielding calls if they do come in. So please,
okay, Todd. One other thing I'd like to add is, you know that I met Jodie through SIA as a survivor looking for somebody to talk to, and her and I have never met face to face yet. We do that next month.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's fantastic.
I've met some of the other survivors and know some of them from the past, but Jodie and I have never met, but yet we're sisters at heart.
Oh, well, that's great. Okay, well, first things first, I guess the big question we're going to start off today, Jodie, and I guess this will apply to you, Dawn, since you're a big part of this group. You're the head of the Missouri chapter, but since Jodie is the national president of SIA, what is SIA? And tell us about it, if you please.
Okay, I'll field this one, Dawn, and then you can kind of add your 2 cents. What is SIA? SIA is, we basically started it because I myself am a survivor, and I was reaching out to other survivors, and on my path of healing, I noticed there was very little help out there for others that had been in a certain situation. Being in an institution, and that could be, a foster home, it could be residential treatment, it could be a mental facility, it could be the juvenile system. And if you're abused in any way, which is physical, sexual, emotional, it's hard to move past that as a youth and move into your adulthood, especially if you've been in, one of these types of facilities for a year or longer. Some people have been in there for, 4 or 5, 6 years. And in these types of facilities, if there is abusive behavior, it is really hard to begin to understand what happened to you and to move forward and be productive in your adulthood. And so SIA basically is there to raise awareness, but also help those who it's almost like we are their sponsor, their support system, and their encouragement. And a lot of times survivors, what they need is just somebody to listen to them. And that's what we're here for, and also raising awareness to this type of abuse.
Wow. I guess I've been looking at your website, and this is a very, very incredible website that you have put together, and I was going through it. And there are a number of people who are members of SIA. You've got a lot of people who are very happy that they're actually looking at this information, what kind of support and what kind of assistance they need in terms of emotional, physical, and sexual abuse, as you pointed out. What sets, I guess the next question I have for you, but first, what's the mission statement overall for SIA? And I guess these questions are applying to you too as well, Dawn. So,
do you want me to read that, Jodie, or do you got it?
Certainly can. You can do that. Sure.
I had that just in case, because I believe Jodi's still working at the same time. Okay, basically, the reason Jodi started and what her purpose was it's dedicated to empower and aid the healing of these adults who have been subject to live in these private or government-run institutions, like she stated, detention centers, foster care, and her mission statement is to help them find the resources they need, to the point where, and help fight legislation to take action to get things done. So at one point in our time, one day in the future, instead of saying we have victims, we can just say we have survivors.
Right.
A little bit of background on institutional child abuse. This is not a new thing. This is, we go way back to American Indians, where they were forced to go into Christian facilities to lose their heritage, and they were only allowed to speak English. They were only allowed to sing the songs that were given to them by these facilities, and they weren't allowed to speak their own language or practice their own religion. And a lot of young American Indians passed away in these facilities. So this is nothing new.
Yeah, Shawnee Indian Nation School in Shawnee Mission, Kansas, about 8 miles from me, did that right after the Civil War.
Right.
And they still have a museum to it, and that's what they did to them.
I guess one question here is, probably the big question that would be on everybody's mind is that, was there a lot of pedophilia going on in these homes, especially at a very young age as well? I mean, that raises a very big, important question there.
Well, I think in any society there is pedophilia. You can't get around it, and no matter if it's a state-run facility or a private-run facility, these pedophiles seem to sneak in there, and so we need to be very vigilant and watchful of our children. And if they are placed in these types of facilities, they need to be regulated. And that's why we're advocating for 2 bills that are in play right now. The HR 3, gosh, I can't remember the number now, and the S.1667. I'll get the number for you for the other one. And I also wanted to mention our website. It's SIA-now.org,
right,
if you're interested in looking at the website or even joining.
Right. What are some of the goals of SIA right now, as they currently stand? I mean, and I guess to go along with that, exactly how many members do you have, and exactly what is percentage-wise as far as the growth of the organization? It seems like it's becoming. It sounds like to me it's becoming popular, even more popular as time goes on. Yeah.
Well, we're a new organization. We've been around for about 2 years, and in that 2 years, we've used social media to gain exposure. And we have a Facebook page, and we have close to 400 members there. And then we have, of course, Twitter, and we have almost, I believe it's over 500 now. And on our membership website, we have over 100 members on the website itself. So we're growing significantly. And I think that's just out there, being out there and available to survivors and helping them to understand what happened to them and helping them move forward. And I think if you run a good program, a good organization, the word will get out there. And I think that's what's happening here.
Right. I guess, one of the biggest discussions here is, what about as far as the number of people who have been reached out to on a daily basis. I mean, it's I'm sure it's a very hard subject to talk about because you mentioned this to me before, Dawn. This is a very touchy subject, and many people are not really comfortable talking about something that's traumatic and very psychological as this as well.
Yes, it is very hard. I can basically, I guess, use myself for an example. I've been away from the facility since 1983, and as a survivor of several of their homes,
right.
I did not even tell anybody anything except for I was at a disciplinary reform home up until 2006. I told my husband a little bit, and then it wasn't until 2010 I told him about the repeated 7 years of rape by multiple members of the organization. It is something, and we'd already been married for a couple of years. It's just something you don't, it's hard to explain because you lose your self-esteem, you lose your identity, although you have an identity to the outside world, but it's like you're in a shell, and you just exist until you get to a point where it either consumes you or you get tired of fighting the demons and you start fighting back.
Right.
And that's what I did. I started fighting back.
Go ahead. You were going to say, Jodi.
Well, I was just going to say, you know, it's really hard for somebody who has never been in that situation to understand all about being in one of these types of facilities, whether it's private run or through the government. One thing that I can say is a lot of these programs, the way that they're run, and to a certain degree, I guess they have to be where it's very regimented, very strict. You wake up at a certain time, you go to bed at a certain time, you take a shower at a certain time, you go to the bathroom at a certain time. And there's very strict rules in these facilities. And when you're combative or you have some issues, psychological or whatever, instead of guiding you, counseling, therapy, that kind of thing, there sometimes is abuse that takes place or physical restraint.
Wow.
Or even emotional abuse to get you to comply. And so there's a lot of people call it the mind modification, where you break the will of a child in order to build them up. And so a lot of these facilities, that's kind of what they do. So they use tactics such as isolation, discipline as far as like demerits or making you write Bible verses or, being put in a room or disciplined with food. And some of them actually use physical restraints and also paddling. And so, if somebody is in this type of a situation for a lengthy period of time, that affects their psyche. And, perfect examples of that is, the prison experiment that was done at Stanford. Those college students volunteered for that, and they were there for a week. And by the time that they were done, a lot of them said they were emotionally scarred for life. And so imagine somebody being in one of these facilities that has kind of a strict regimen and physical restraint and seclusion and isolation, for them to be in this type of facility for, a year, 2 years, 3 years, that is something that you have a hard time getting past, because when you get out of a facility like this,
right,
you become an adult, you don't know how the real world operates. You don't know how to balance a checkbook. You don't know how to pay your rent. You don't know where the utilities come from. And you're 18 and you're kind of just thrown out there and expected to perform and be successful. And a lot of times what happens is these children end up going back to things they know. which is, some of them are runaways, some of them had done drugs in the past, so they return to that. Or, in special circumstances, it might be somebody that turns to a life of prostitution or something like that because that's what they know. And so they end up getting, in trouble with the law, and the cycle just kind of continues. And if they don't become, in trouble with the law, they have problems, in their family dynamics. So in other words, their inner family, but also, their sister-in-law, their brother-in-law, their external family, and they have a problem relating because they have a lot of times post-traumatic stress disorder. They have, other related psychological problems such as depression or bipolar or split personality disorder, things of that nature. So they're really trying hard to focus and do right and discipline and be a mother or a father, but they do what they know, and so it perpetuates the abuse. And so what we're trying to do is help them understand what happened to them so that it stops, the cycle stops here, and they learn how to be successful as adults.
I guess one big question that comes out of all this, too, is religion that plays a role in this. I know religion played a role in a very big part of your traumatic life experiences within these homes, Dawn. And I know that, Christianity, or particularly organized religion, was actually a lot of the people who were involved in that particular sect were very hush-hush about what was going on. And they were just keeping mum about the whole thing. Is religion a very big focus that goes on in these homes, Jodi? Even in your case?
It just depends on what facilities that you were sent to, whether it's by the courts or whether it's by your parents. There are private run facilities that are religious or Christian boarding schools, as they would call it, or reform schools, and there's a large percentage of those. And what happens is, in the facility that I was at, and I can only speak to that, and Dawn can speak to the facility that she was at, they use God kind of like as a tool to make you comply. So they have a very warped sense of what the Bible actually says, and they, because you're so secluded, you can't go out and talk to somebody about it. You can't go out and debate the issue. You're just meant to comply. And so when you get out of a facility that has kind of a religious base to it, you're very confused because obviously they're preaching something in real life, in your life, that's not what you learned as a Christian. And so it's almost like the fire and brimstone preaching about going to hell, and if you don't do right, you're sinning, you're against God, and they have kind of a very warped sense of what the Bible actually says, and they use that to their advantage. And, I can only speak to the facility that I was at, but I've known and spoke to, hundreds of survivors, and that is what I get back. That's kind of, I don't know, Dawn, maybe you could speak to this more than I can.
That's pretty much the consensus on the religious-based ones. I have talked with a few that have been in non-religious-based ones that used a lot of physical and had a lot of physical and sexual abuse, but their punishment was on you're not going to get out of here because we're going to work with the courts and keep you here. Where the religious-based homes that I was in used, you're going to burn in hell because you're not abiding by God's law. They just different threats.
I'll give you an example, Todd. In the facility that I was at, they used something called the sheep and goats, and we were all
sheep and goats.
Yeah, we were all herded into the chapel, and the pastor would pick out by just pointing his finger. You're a sheep, you're a goat, you're a sheep, you're a goat, you're a sheep, you're a goat, and you would have to remember what you are, and then we would be separated. And the sheep were the good ones, and they got to go out and play outside, which was a huge thing, and eat candy and that kind of thing. And they didn't have to do their regular chores. Where the goats were held in a pen in the chapel and made to write lines or demerits and sit there and watch the others while they enjoyed their time being free from the rules and such. And the goats also were made to do the chores and whatnot of the sheep. So that's kind of one of those kind of mind psyche things that they do to make you comply, to make you be a good sheep so that you follow their rules. That's just an example of some of the tactics that they use.
What about education? How were the schools in those facilities?
Well, subpar at best. I can speak to several people, survivors have told me that the facilities that they went to weren't even accredited. So when they left the facility, they couldn't even go back and have the credits to go back into high school to get their high school diploma. I know for myself that was the case. So I had to go and take my GED in order to move on with my education, because the credits that I had gleaned from being at that school didn't mean nothing, didn't mean anything.
Wow. And I assume that was the same for you, right, Dawn?
Actually, for me, it was a little bit different. Of the several facilities, I actually received a high school diploma early from the one facility I was at. And what they did is, being that it was a private fundamentalist Baptist setting, I was shipped off underage to a fundamentalist Baptist college that actually was accredited, so they accepted my unaccredited high school diploma. And after one semester, it was accepted. However, when I went to go back to college years down the road in Missouri, I had to actually take a high school equivalency test for acceptance.
Wow.
Because it was not, even though I had a college preparatory diploma with alleged some odd oodles of credits, and actually had some of the fundamentalist movements, what they call now the School of Tomorrow, I actually had college credits that I had done during my high school term.
Wow.
I had to fight for.
Yeah, there is a convention coming up for SIA, and when's that, and where's that going to be?
Okay, let me tell you first, before I tell you about the convention, I wanted to go back to that bill that's out there. It's H.R. 3126, and that's Stop Child Abuse in Residential Programs. This bill has been in play. It was called something else last year. It actually made it all the way to the Senate, and then it stalled in the Senate. And it's basically allowing federal regulation for these types of facilities, or federal oversight, because now the way that the law sits is that each state governs their own. And so you look at these facilities, and they go to states that have little or no laws, and so they're allowed to, run without licenses, things of this nature, not
Missouri.
Child abuse, yeah. And so each state has its own laws on these types of facilities. And so the reason why these bills are so important is because it allows for federal regulation and that will be huge in the fight against institutional child abuse. So on to the convention. Basically, we decided that we wanted to have a convention for survivors, but also to bring awareness about this type of abuse, because a lot of people don't know about it. And we wanted to bring out this awareness so that we can help to bring these two bills out there for the public to see, so hopefully we can get these passed. The theme of the convention is called United with One Voice, and we're hoping that is enough of us come together and speak loud enough that people will hear us. And that's what this convention is all about. It's about healing and bringing awareness. And it's February 24th through the 26th at Long Beach, California, at the Queen Mary. And we're really, really excited. We have over 70 people signed up to come to the convention. And if you want to come to the convention, it's not just for survivors. It's for supporters of survivors and survivors. So if you want to know more information, you just want to come out and support, you have to go to the website to register. It's very important that you register so that we, know how much food and whatnot and feeding. So the website to go to look at, the type of things that we're going to be doing at the convention is SIA-convention.org.
Wow. That's going to be very important so that people actually. Now, I assume there's going to be like a dinner served there, like an early bird type of dinner thing, like a buffet, that sort of thing.
We have, it's going to be a weekend. So on Friday night, there's going to be a discussion panel, and we have some really great speakers that are going to come out and represent for us. And they'll be part of the discussion panel, and we're inviting the press to be there for that. And some of the speakers that are going to be there is Alexia Parks. She wrote a book called An American Gulag, and it's a really, really great book, and it talks about the mistreatment of children in America and how it's kind of like a POW camp for teens. And she's just a phenomenal lady, and she's coming out to represent and support us, and we're just really happy to have her. Right. And Mark Levine is another speaker, and he will be leading the discussion panel, and he is a political analyst, and he is a heavy advocate for our cause. And he's been on CNN and Fox News, and he just is helping us to understand how the politics works, and helping us to understand what we need to do with these bills that are in play. And then also just helping us as far as the insights to what we can do as an organization to help survivors. And the next speaker is Nick, and I always butcher his name, but it's Gallia. And he has done two feature films. One is called Over the GW, and the other one is The Air and Bacon Story. And they're both on the convention website if you want to go and take a look at those. We're going to be screening those movies at the convention. And these movies basically, Over the GW is his own personal experience within one of these types of facilities. And The Air and Bacon Story is a tragic death that happened at a wilderness camp. And they're both just brilliant movies. And
wow.
He also spoke on Capitol Hill about his experiences in the drug rehab center that he was at. And so he's a huge supporter, and we're really glad to have him come out and speak and be a part of the convention. And the final speaker is Dr. Yanya Lynch, and her specialty is in cults, and she has offered to give us a discussion on the dynamic influences, controls, control used in extremist institutional settings, as well as the survival mechanisms and tools for the road to recovery. So she's going to give us some examples and some feedback on how we move forward after a traumatic experience such as abuse in childhood.
Well, just so you know, you have a friend and supporter of your cause as well here. So
Thank you.
Really am.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much.
And it's, you know, listening to your stories so far is, you know, it's funny because I know a couple of gals I dated in the past who were also raped and abused by their families and whatnot. So I can definitely identify, you know, that area there, what you guys are going for, and unfortunately we had a caller on the line who I was going to bring on a second ago, but I guess he decided to hang up. So Muay Thai guy, if that's your name, please call back. I have no, I don't know if you are a survivor, but please call back in. We'd love to hear from you. So there you have it. So I guess another question here, you know, exactly how much money has SIA raised to spread awareness about what's going on in particular situations?
Definitely, as a nonprofit, and being a new nonprofit at that, we're still working towards gathering funds. We, on donations alone, have raised almost $4,000 for this convention. And keep in mind, this convention is free. We've made it free so that every survivor that has the ability to travel out to Long Beach can attend. Wow. And so we have had sponsors that have come forward to donate their services in order for us to make this convention free. And the Queen Mary over there in Long Beach has been just wonderful in helping us as far as the cost goes. So we just have a lot of supporters right now helping us put this convention together. We're working to get grants and actually bring on some self-help and that kind of thing. So our future is very bright.
Right. Now, you said that there are two bills that are actually in the House and the Senate. What's the likelihood of them actually getting passed at this point? Because, you know, because if they're going to be federal laws, then there would have to be an enormous amount of oversight over what the states are doing. And it sounds like there's this collusion between private and government centers that are really, you know, foisting upon this scam that, well, these people are being taken care of at a young age when actually they're not. They're being abused. What's the chance of these bills actually being passed this year? And if not, do you see that they will ever be passed in our lifetime?
I'd say it's very slim, and I'll tell you why that is. Because we have a lot of Democratic support, but not a lot of Republican support. And, you know, the teen reform industry or residential teen industry is $1 billion industry. It makes lots of money for lots of people. And, you know, the politics in this is just very deep. And to get federal regulation, you know, I hope that it passes, but we have a very slim chance. And it's all about the people and the people telling their congressmen to go and support this bill. And there's a website. It's called Popbox, popbox.com. And you can show your support there. And anything that you put there, it will be sent directly to your congressman. And so the more people that reach out to their congressman and saying, I support this bill, the more chance it has.
Wow.
Also, Todd, if I might add to that, I can give you an example. In early 1980s, one of the founders of the homes I was in was at People's Baptist Church Christian Schools, Roll-Off Ministries.
Right.
They had their organization. There was a bill trying to be passed for more transparency. It was being passed by a man by the name of Mark White.
Okay.
I sat there in this church. Now, mind you, I was in one of the homes. They had multitudes of members outside in the community that attended this church also during services. I witnessed with my own eyes sitting there as they got up at the pulpit and said that it was God's will that everybody must fight this bill with Mark White, so they needed to get a hold of all their fellow church affiliates and associates. And then they passed out an offering plate and said that they needed to take names and people needed to write out checks to the specific candidate or to the specific candidate for donations. And I sat and watched individuals write out checks as donations to support a candidate to shoot down a bill for transparency and support this guy who was against it. And when you have a church that's full of over 1,000 people, it was quite interesting that they did that, but I vividly remember it because it was close to the same time after my high school graduation. So I remembered it very well. That was one of the tactics they used, but they also preached that if people did not vote against this bill, that they most likely would be condemned to hell and multitudes of other things. I don't know what happens in any of the other facilities. I just remember that is what happened at the People's Baptist Church when they had their session on that. And they had special prayer meetings for it. And it was right before that founder, Lester Roloff, had died. It was right before he passed when that happened.
So where were you specifically incarcerated at, Jodi? I mean...
It was in San Diego, California, and it was called Victory Christian Academy, and it was run by a man named Michael Palmer.
Wow.
It was raided and closed down in 1991 by the FBI. But they turned around and moved the facility to Florida, where the laws are less strict. And they changed the name, and it's still open today.
That is just abominable. I mean, what's really sad about this is the politics of religion, government, and state using this to encourage sexual abuse. Because as me being a libertarian believer in a free market, this sort of thing would never happen in a real free market. But this sort of thing happening now is just pathetic. That even you've got members of Congress, Republican members of Congress, who are basically looking the other way and saying, gee, why aren't these politicians, why aren't the governors being called upon for being outed for allowing this to happen? Why aren't the police who have some sort of ties to this aren't being outed for this? Why are they all being protected? It's a huge money-making industry, and there seems, and I'm willing to bet you that there's a lot of human trafficking in that kind of area. Am I right, or am I being paranoid here?
A few facilities. I wouldn't. A lot of them don't have the sex abuse. There are some out there. It depends upon facilities. I mean, not all the facilities had the sex abuse and the trafficking issues, but some of them did.
Well, let me just tell you about a report that was given by the Government Accountability Office. It says, in 2007, 33 states reported 1,619 staff members involved in incidents of abuse in residential programs. The Government Accountability Office could not identify a more concrete number of allegations because it could not locate a single website, federal agency, or other entity that collects comprehensive national-wide data. So this shows you the problem right there. There's no accountability, and there's no collection of data. There's no oversight, and with that many accounts of abuse in 33 states, brings some results. Another thing that I want to mention is, there is ties. Mitt Romney has ties to the teen industry. He was the owner of the Aspen Education Corporation, and
I'm glad you brought him up because he's a Mormon, and I always make a big deal about the candidate with the magic underpants, being part of his religion. And this is a guy who basically, we're talking about Mormonism, which is spun off from the FLDS, which is the extreme radical version of Mormonism, in polygamy. And, what's really sad about this is, if you remember back in Texas where the federal authorities confiscated the children from that compound, because they were given a call by supposedly a 16-year-old girl who later turned out to be a woman in her 30s. And the choices that the women were making were just horrendous. And the damage that was done to these kids, the way it was handled, was just irresponsible. It should never went down the way it did.
Right.
But what's really disgusting about this is that all too often that area of Christianity, even though polygamy is illegal, the problem is that is the root and foundation of Mormonism, and there's a strand of DNA of that within Christianity. I don't want to gang up on all Christians and say, well, they're all like this, but it's very prevalent, it's very prominent, and this is a big problem, isn't it?
Well, I would say, I always say this, I do not believe that this is a religious problem. I believe that this is a problem that's not only in the United States, it's international. And so the focus, to me, should not be on religion. It should be on the abuse itself. And the fact that these children are in these facilities and there is no oversight. And so these perpetuators of abuse can continue to abuse because there is no oversight. And, I mentioned Mitt Romney, but it's not just him. It's, Rick Santorum has ties to this as well. And so if you, he was on the board over there at UHS for 7 years, and he retired from the board just as he was going to go for his nomination. So, again, I think, to me, it's not a religious thing, it's an abuse thing. And we need to stop the abuse, and we need to hold people accountable for this abuse, whether it's emotional abuse, physical abuse, or sexual abuse. It should not happen to our children. That's right. It should not be happening to our children. And we need to take steps to stop it. And in my opinion, the only way to stop it is for regulation or oversight. Because if these people have no oversight, they can do what they want, and these perpetuators of abuse can sneak in there. And unfortunately, there's been deaths in these facilities, and it just breaks my heart because we can stop it. It shouldn't be happening.
Is there Yeah, I was going to say, is there any evidence of, say, suicide?
Oh yeah.
Within that kind of culture that we're talking about, the system of abuse.
Oh yes. The facility that I was at, later on in my stay, I was made what they call a helper, and that means that you had somebody that you were on oversight of the other children, so it was peer discipline, and you had new people that came in, new children that came in that you were asked to buddy. They called it buddy. And so basically they followed you around and you kind of showed them the ropes and what to do. And two of these ladies, but they were girls back then, had suicide attempts. The first one threw a fire extinguisher through a window and tried to cut her wrist. And I had to jump on her in order to prevent that. And there at the place that I was at, there was no medical staff. There was one little old lady that was considered our nurse, but she was not a licensed nurse. And the second person that I buddied, I was in the laundry room, and she drank bleach, and I had to stick my finger down her throat, literally, in order to save her life. And I don't think this is a unique thing. I think this is very prevalent in these facilities because you become so disillusioned and you feel like there's no way out. The only way out is obviously suicide, and that is attempted. And it's sad, but I believe it occurs quite frequently. And I want to also mention that not only in the facilities does this happen, but also later on when you get out of the facility, like I said, there is no help, there's no education, there's nothing to help you be successful as an adult. And so you go back to your old behaviors and back to what you know. And a lot of times what happens is these people, there's either murder, rape, suicide. In the facility that I was in, we know of 5 that have either killed themselves or were murdered after the fact. And I'm sure there's many more. We just haven't found out about it yet.
Well, any time that there is any kind of, say, crime that is going on, a crime that is, say, abuse, but also anything that would be considered rape or coercion by somebody should be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And, the problem is that these things are often overlooked and just shoved under the rug. It's kind of like how, crimes involving victims, and these are crimes involving victims, definitely. These are people, and these are people who are being abused physically, and they and the perpetrators of these crimes should definitely be held accountable for their actions, and they should be prosecuted to the fullest extent where they should be forced to pay for their crimes. And the problem is that, as you were telling me, there's no federal oversight, but more importantly, there should be prosecution of these people.
Well, Todd, I can add to that. Statute of limitations. Statute of limitations is my issue. I was so afraid when I left that I kept silent for so long, and when I left the facility and went home, I went into a fundamentalist home setting at home. When I finally did get away from that, I was so frightened from so many, you get that ingrained in your head. It's kind of like a Stockholm syndrome. It does not go away. It just doesn't vanish the day you walk out that door. And when it started hitting me really hard, I was 23 years old, the mother of 4 kids, laying in a hospital in ICU because I tried to commit suicide. And when I was put through counseling, I tried to talk to a counselor when my mom, we went to these religious homes, and I tried to, and they didn't believe me. But in the 80s, you hear this story, and they've not heard it from anybody else. They don't believe it. And then they say, well, why didn't you prosecute? Well, because you didn't want to have whatever horrible thing was ingrained into your brain happen to you. It didn't take, and now when I came to the point that I could discuss it, statute of limitations has run out, and 2 specific people that had done this to me have already passed away. So karma got them.
Right.
Well, and I think that too. You were talking about Stockholm syndrome, where you begin to relate after you've been in that situation. For a year, 2 years, 3 years, you begin to relate to those that are out on staff and buy into what it is that they're telling you. And keep in mind, at these facilities, there's no access to phones, there's no access to television, there's no access to writing a letter. Those are all screens. And so when you get out, you're pretty much buying into the program. Some people do, some people don't. And for me, I was made to believe that if I didn't go into this facility that I was going to die. So when I got out, what did I say? This program saved my life, I'm so glad I went there, because if I wouldn't have gone into this program, I would be dead. And this is what I was told over and over and over again while I was there, and I was there for a year. And it took a very long time for me to sort out kind of my emotions and my feelings and understand what it is that actually happened to me there. I was put into a room, an isolation room, which was called the Get Right room. I was put in there 3 times, and over the course of the year. And depending on what it is I did, the first time I was put in there, I actually forgot my pencil for school, and I was there for approximately a week and 2 days, somewhere around in there. And while I was in the Get Right room, keep in mind there's nothing there. There's no bed. There's no pillow, no blanket, no nothing like that. You're allowed to go out to go to the bathroom, take a shower, and your food is brought to you. And in the place that I was at, they had preaching tapes playing over and over and over and over again. And so that does something to you. That's kind of, it reminds me of the concentration camps or these camps that are out there that do that mind modification. And so when I got out...
Which is a politically correct term for brainwashing, pretty much.
Yeah. So when I got out of this place, and I feel like my story is so much less than what others suffered. So, for me, I feel like I was on the tame end, where I didn't get as much like physical abuse. It was more emotional for me. And so I had to kind of unravel all of that and understand what it is that took place in order to begin to heal my life. And I had heavy depression. I didn't understand why I was depressed. I was married, very much in love, had kids, and, for all intents and purposes, a very happy life. But I was going through these bouts of depression and anxiety, and I had a problem trusting people. But I didn't understand that this is where that came from. And so it took me almost 10 years to realize. And by the time 10 years had come by, there's no way to prosecute because the statute of limitations has run out.
Right. I believe that the statute of limitations on these kind of crime, on these type of crimes, I think it's something like 2 years. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's, and I'm sure, and I know it varies from state to state in some cases, but Michigan, I know it's 2 years. So.
Same in Missouri. Texas is 3.
Right.
So, yeah, it varies from state to state, but keep in mind that, my experience was minimal compared to some experiences of survivors that I've heard. And, if it took me that long to kind of sort things out, a lot of times what, people will ask, well, if it's so abusive, why aren't people calling out today? Why don't you see people today saying that they were abused? Well, because when they first get out, the generic answer is, this place saved my life. If I wouldn't have gone here, I would have died. You know,
Right. So
to try to get past that and understand what happened to you, it takes some time.
Moneypenny, one person who came in the room identified as Moneypenny, says there are hundreds, if not thousands, of victim survivors who suffer at the hands of these religious leaders in these behavior modification homes or forced clothes. And she goes, "You're right. Once there, you're stuck."
Yeah.
No one believes them when they do tell their parents or their pastors. They carry their abuse in silence. They are guilted into keeping silent. Brainwashing is a huge problem. Thinking for themselves and rationalizing anything is almost an impossible task for a young and impressionable child. No one wants to relive their horrible abuse. Unfortunately, courts are the last places they want to be, much less facing their abuser again. She seems to have a very good point there.
Absolutely.
Yes. It took me 28 years.
Right. You know, I think, you know, what was really terrible here, particularly in your case, Dawn, you know, and you can also provide more of your experiences because you wrote a book about your detailed experiences. And
yeah, I wasn't in one home. I actually went into 3 and worked at 2 out of forced coercion.
Right. And you know, what was that like for you on a daily basis? You probably got very little sleep.
Well, like Jody said, you have a set time you get up. You have a set time you go to sleep. You have a set order of rules that you must go by. I, for some reason, was not one of those lucky ones to reach helper status. I'm naturally oppositional, defiant by nature. I was first sent because I grew up in a fundamentalist home, and one of the things you do not do is you do not look at a boy. There is a 6-inch rule. There must be a songbook between you. I had this young boy that I thought was neat. Of course, now mind you, I'm a very young child then. And he smiled and waved at me, and I made the mistake of doing the same thing in return. And all of a sudden, I was pretty much a harlot. I was going to burn in hell. I had probably had sex, and I wasn't even old enough to know what it was, really, at that time, because being in the fundamentalist home, I didn't know what it was. And so I landed in my first home.
Right.
Then was there between 79 and 80, and then 80, 81 in another home, and then 81 to 82 in another home. And then in the end of 82 and 83, forced to work in one. That didn't last very long. I worked about 2 months. I was an emancipated adult by the state standard that I was in because I had finished their unaccredited high school.
Wow.
And just... everything's on a schedule. Even as a staff member, you're so brainwashed that you comply. You just do. You go with the flow. You forget
don't
who
want to
you
piss
are.
off the apple cart, pretty much.
You go with the flow. You do what's programmed in your head. You become a robot.
Right.
You just do it. It reminds me of Pavlov's theory, where the ringing of the bell and the dogs came running for food. That bell rang in our heads, and we just followed what we knew was the routine.
There, you know, I guess, you know, were there any government, say, any police officers, any people at the local level who had their paws in the entire system at all? Not
that I know of. In my case, what happened is evidently there was some accusations of abuse in Rebecca home, Corpus Christi, Texas, that I was in. I was in the home, and I had family members that worked outside of the home on the compound property itself, which was all fenced in with a security guard shack. I guess the religion is so good they didn't want anybody, the devil to get in. I'm not quite sure what the purpose of that was. But, well, actually I do, but at that time I thought it was to keep the devil and the bad people out. We did see some officers there, but they were there on a complaint of abuse, and since I was in a non-compliant mode and I was on what they call watch status and not allowed to talk to anybody, I was ushered onto a bus because you could hear the adult staff whispering that they want to talk to all the girls individually without staff present to see if anybody's being abused. So all of us that were the little so-called labeled troublemakers, red shirts, I had an ugly red plaid shirt, we were shoved onto a bus and taken to stay out of the Intercoastal Waterway in a shack so we could not be interviewed.
Wow.
So, but I didn't really see much of anything. I did see officers there, but I was too frightened to look. You don't look, you don't pay attention, but I am sure something must have went on, but I just can't confirm anything. I was too scared to even look. I just knew I had to get on that bus, or I was back down the prayer hall into the little nice closet they had where people like me needed to belong and we couldn't conform.
We have somebody on the line named Wi-Fi Guy. Hello, are you there?
Hello? Yes, I'm here.
Hello. Did you have a question or a comment?
Oh, no. I actually know who Jodi Hobbs is because I've been in contact with her for the past 3 months or so. I was pretty much kidnapped out of my home at 4:30 a.m. about 16 years ago, and I was taken to a desert wilderness program where I spent about 4 weeks there, and then shuffled straight off to a therapeutic boarding school. And
wow.
It was a pretty awful therapeutic boarding school, and it's just associated with many other therapeutic boarding schools, and these like you said before, these places are just cash cows for sucker parents. And if there's anything I could possibly ever do or say to dissuade a parent from sending their child away from home, period, let alone to one of these places, I would.
I'd be even just as equally worried if, say, a young teen, say at the age of 13 or 14, who is trying to figure out his or her sexuality, and that he's either gay or even say of any orientation, if you will, that would probably be hell on that child, particularly when if they're in a religious or non-religious school or home, if you will.
It's really funny you say that, because the founder of the school that I was sent to was actually homosexual, openly homosexual, and it was later found out that he was on the main CEO, secretary, and treasurer for all of his companies for his school. And his boyfriend was running these non-profit organizations that made it look all pretty, for the legislature. So it's not only, and there was a Christian aspect to the place I went to, so it was mixed messages and very hypocritical. So a very chaotic environment for sure. not an environment that's therapeutic in any sense of the word.
Right. Jodi, Dawn, do you have anything to say to that?
I do. Thanks for calling in, Wi-Fi guy. I appreciate it very much. I wanted to ask you a question about, because you were in two different places, can you just kind of describe the very beginning, how it happened and what you had to go through in the very first place?
Okay. The first one was a wilderness program, and it was a much rougher environment than the therapeutic boarding school. We were given basically all of our belongings were able to be wrapped up into a backpack that we carried everywhere with us. We were not allowed to bathe with anything except for boiled water every once in a while when we stopped for the evening. We had timed roll-ups in the morning, so like you get up and you had to beat the clock and get on the road, by a certain time, and it's the butt crack of dawn and below zero temperature, and it was not fun to spend my Thanksgiving cooped up at that place, or not even cooped. It was wide open, like you could go anywhere, but pretty much anywhere you went was either farmers' territory or Rattlesnake Canyon, and also, I believe there is a record of more than one child dying at the place that I went to. One in 1985 and one about 5 years ago. This place has been open for 30 years. These people have been running these places for so long, it's ridiculous.
And they seem to go under the radar. It's right. Very, very sad. And being in that kind of condition for that amount of time has to do something to you emotionally. And then being shipped off directly after that into a therapeutic boarding school, maybe talk a little bit about that and share kind of your emotional state.
Well, it was fairly close to a nervous breakdown, I suppose. I got sent out there, and when I was out there, I just had to come to grips with the fact that I was going to be out there, and that I was going to try and get home as quickly as I possibly could. And I found out the wilderness program was only a 21-day program, and I was happy about that. Well, when my graduation day came up and I was successfully completing all the skills necessary to go home. Basically, that's all I wanted to do was go home. All I could think about was going home. And the director of the program came to talk to me, and she said, "You're not going home. Your parents are taking a vacation to Mexico, and you're going to stay here another week, and then you're going to go directly to a therapeutic boarding school." And that was probably one of the single most saddest points, I think, in my entire life. I was acting like a baby. I'm sure I was just crying and bawling, and it was definitely a traumatic experience, because basically the people you're supposed to trust the most and love the most, the people who are supposed to take care of you and protect me, they turned on me completely. And I know I wasn't doing good, and like you say, Todd, teenagers will be teenagers, and I know I was at a negative cycle in my teenage career, but I guess I just didn't feel that it really mitigated that type of treatment at all. And then when I got to the therapeutic boarding school, I found I was in a much different environment. We had access to showers and amenities. It seemed like the wilderness program was so horrible that the therapeutic boarding school seemed okay. That's how bad it was. And when I got to the therapeutic boarding school, I found out that 21 to 28 days was nothing. That they had 3 Springs, Alabama, and kids were there for a year in the woods. I can't imagine, 30 days doing that to me, what a year or 2 years did to some of these kids. And I guess I can imagine it because I saw them at the therapeutic boarding school. They were broken. Their spirits were broken. Their minds were broken. It was just a bunch of broken kids stumbling around trying to put their brains back together. And the counselors, who were unlicensed and had lots of fake degrees, were incompetent, belligerent idiots, uneducated, and the therapy sessions were jokes. And the academics were jokes. It was a joke, too. I did 3 years of high school in 18 months. And, it was like it was fake. It wasn't even real.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this question. In going into the therapeutic boarding school, understanding that you are not going to be going home, I want the listeners to understand how the parents are somewhat brainwashed in the understanding that this will save my child. And I want the parents that are listening to this to understand that this is a tactic that they use to pull your child in so that they can take your money. This can be anywhere from $1,500 a month all the way up to $6,000 a month that these parents pay in order to save or rescue their child. And really what they're doing is causing harm to their child that will be with them for the rest of their life. I was just wondering, Wi-Fi, if you could kind of speak to that.
Okay. Well, what my parents did was they took me to an educational consultant. And, of course, they were absolutely desperate to have something to do with, to do something with me, basically, because they were I was out of their control, and they wanted a way to control me. So I think they had a little bit of a twisted way of viewing things. Maybe my mom didn't, and my dad did more. There was definitely a slightly split dynamic there. However, they both sat down and agreed together to do these things, and they took me to a educational consultant who told them that I was in a cult, that I was, that I was in very dire need of this boarding school, to get out of my environment, to get out of to be placed in a more positive environment, which maybe was true. But the positive environment that she deigned to sell my parents was nothing more than that. It was just a sale of, we will fix your kid, we will make them better, we will make their behavior normal, and you'll be happy after you pay your $100,000. And that's how they did it. And my parents loved it. They ate every second of it. They prepaid the entire program, and I felt it in my soul when I got to that therapeutic boarding school, because my father was there, and I looked into his eyes, and I know my father well enough to know that there was no way that I was going to finish early or get pulled from that program. They had committed me to it, and they had been totally just, they washed their hands of it. They signed me away and washed their hands of it, and they were happy. They moved on with their life, raised my sister, took care of their businesses. Without me there, it was how they originally had wanted it, I suppose. They were having somebody else raise their child, their problem child.
All right. I guess for you, Muay Thai, did you ever at any point try to at least escape? Try to try to seek some sort of help from the police, from the local authorities, or was that an impossible route for you to take?
Well, definitely at the wilderness program, it's pretty close to impossible, although not unheard of. I'm not going to go running off into the desert. I did not trust myself to survive that well. So I was going to wait out that 3 weeks and just do whatever it is that they told me to do, and hopefully I wouldn't get too badly punished or whatever, have to go through whatever, which actually I relatively didn't compared to some other kids, I'm sure. And the therapeutic boarding school was a slightly different matter. It was more like I think I lost my train of thought. What was that question again? What was it like to do what now?
Were you going to? Did you try to escape or leave or anything like that?
Oh, did I ever try and escape? Oh God, no. Yeah, it's 10 miles to town square. The cops are on the school's side, and if they catch you, the people who catch you are Army Rangers, and who knows what they're going to do with you between when they catch you and when they put you, wherever it is. You know what I'm talking about? So, these guys are pretty messed up in their heads to begin with, and that's the restriction staff. Those aren't our counselors. Our counselors are quote unquote licensed professionals, which they aren't. But the people who run the punishment and the people who chase after you if you run away are trained military staff.
And in facilities like the one that he's talking about, if you do escape and you make it, if you get caught by the police, chances are they will send you right back to the facility, and you will get disciplined and punished even further, and you'll be made an example of. Wi-Fi, I want to ask you one more question. Mm-hmm. Your relationship with your family now. Because I was explaining that, this irreparable damage that happens, it's not only to your immediate family, but your extended family as well. I just wanted to touch base with that.
Yeah, it definitely did irreparable damage to my immediate family. I tried many times to reconcile. They tried to reconcile with me. I think there was just the trust level that will never be reached, but could never to this point be reached. With my extended family, I am in contact with my grandfather, and that's pretty much my only blood relative that I talk to on any kind of regular basis. But this has been a 16-year-long journey of trying to reconcile and being unable to. And it's been frustrating to me because I want to reconcile. I want my family back. I love them. I miss them. I miss having a home. I miss having a family. I miss having that closeness, the bonds, the intimacy, and all of the stuff related to that. But, there was no compromise that could be worked, and only the extremes had presented themselves.
I just want to thank you so much for calling in and sharing a bit of your story with us. It's so courageous for you to come on the show.
I agree, White. I think for you to call in and talk about your experiences, it's just devastating, and it's horrifying and very repugnant to hear what they did to you when you were that young. I guess one other question is, how's your mental state today? How are you handling life right now as we speak?
It's difficult to handle life right now. I get, obsessed with these matters surrounding this particular school sometimes, of course. But it's shut down, so that leaves me with a bit of peace of mind. The facility I was sent to is now shut down, and I cope as good as well as I can. It's hard for me to keep a job. I'm still struggling to self-employ. It's really impossible for me to take orders from people, any kind of authority, anything like that. Sometimes I get defensive about things. I mean, I would say I handle what I have pretty well, as far as that's concerned. I'm sure I could handle it better. I'm sure I could have turned it into a positive sooner. I wish I had. I wish I had the energy to just convert that. But it's so difficult once those mental blocks are in place. It's just you're stuck in this loop, and you don't want to get out. You don't want to sever these relationships you have with your biological family, but at the same time, the continued contact with them just perpetuates your disease. So it's like you get stuck in this, you know. So sometimes I still feel bad about that too, you know, my parents, my mom. I love my parents. I miss them. I want to spend time with them, good quality time with them, fun. That's, you know, everybody gets to be themselves. But that's never been possible. Everybody's just too uptight about things and reserved and suppressed, and I can't be around that. I'm not like that. I like to open myself up. I've always thrown temper tantrums. I've always been loud and obnoxious and just very expressive, and no amount of brainwashing could ever really keep that down at all.
Well, I am so proud to know you, and every survivor has their own journey to take, and you've started on your journey, and I am just so encouraged by you and the steps that you've taken so far, and I just look forward to your future. It's very bright, and you are a survivor, and thank you so much for reaching out.
Thank you, guys. It's part of the healing process. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, Muay-Thai, thank you so much for calling to the show. I think by doing this, not only are you helping others, but you're also helping yourself. And I think you, I don't know if any counseling or any therapy is going to help you along the way. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But at least it's something, you know, at least you're capable of, you know, dealing with a very sensitive and very difficult and very traumatizing and very emotional subject that is, you know, is pushed under the rug because it's one of those taboo subjects that you couldn't even talk about, say, 30, 40 years ago. Yeah.
And you sharing your story is going to help others in their healing process. It's like we're perpetuating healing, and I'm just so grateful for that because, you know, maybe 30 years ago we wouldn't be able to be having this conversation. But here we are today, and look at us now, united, you know, with this one voice and speaking out loud about this. I'm just so encouraged.
Yeah, I think even less than 30 years, I think even 10 years ago we wouldn't be talking about this. I was amazed that, you know, parents even have the power to do this type of thing.
Yeah.
And thank you very much again.
Yep. Thank you so much, Muay-Thai. You take care, and good luck to you. And I wish you all the success and all the rewarding aspects life has to offer for you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah. Can I just say one more thing?
Oh, go ahead, please.
I do want to say one thing about the runaways. Kids who run away do sometimes make it, even without any money, without any help, or without anything. They do sometimes make it. Now, I'm not saying it's okay to go ahead and go running away into the desert or into the woods or anything like that. But I will say that some of them have made it out of there. Some of them have walked away and survived that too.
Wow. Absolutely.
And that's it. I just wanted to give hope for all the kids who are, especially because everybody thinks about it. Whenever they first get to the place, they think about getting out of there, trying to break out, trying to bust out, trying to figure out a way to get out of there. But, not everybody goes through with it, and not everybody succeeds, and not everybody, comes out okay. So it's a big risk, and again, I wouldn't necessarily recommend or condone it. But I will say it's possible.
Right. I totally can understand that. Thank you so much, Muay Thai.
No problem.
You are you're a hero to a lot of these people, and I think you have you have a lot to say, and you are a brave person. Come forward. I'm sure this hasn't been easy for you. I mean, I've never been in this kind of situation myself, but I've known people who have been in these kinds of situations, and it's very hard to talk about it for them. So I wish you all the success in the world, and thank you so much for calling to the show.
Thanks, Todd.
Yep. Okay. If anybody else has anything they want to call in to talk about their experiences, please do. The number is 724-444-7444. The call ID number is 91679, and the PIN number is, all you gotta do is just dial 1 and the area code, and 1 and then pound, and you're on. So there you have it. Okay, so I guess one of the important things here is what's next for SIA right now, Jodi? I mean, what are you guys hoping to achieve within, say, the next 5 to 10 years?
Oh, we have a lot of goals, definitely, but the main focus right now for us, obviously, is the convention that's happening in February, trying to reach out and get as many people there as we possibly can to raise this awareness and promote healing. And, within the next 2 years, we want to do a March on Washington. Dawn can speak about a couple of the things that she's doing, which are just really phenomenal. She is working on the self-help portion of SIA, so maybe you could speak to that a little bit, Dawn.
Yeah, go ahead, Dawn.
Okay, what we're doing is we're kind of creating workbooks. I know you're familiar with or you've heard of the AA program, where they have self-help workbooks and journals where people can write in them, and there's key phrases and help tips and affirmations. We're starting to create some of those books and workbooks to be able to make available, and that's the purpose of the grants we're working on, is to help fund those. So when we have somebody that comes to us that has their self-esteem broken down, and they're going through the beginning process of trying to find who they are, they have a workbook to help them along that they can write some of these emotions in, and little affirmations to put with it, and a reach-out support system, kind of like a buddy, so somebody they can call and use with their workbook. So when they have a hard spot and they can't put it into words, sometimes journaling makes it easier for you to be able to deal with an emotion if you have somewhere to put it. And then when you talk to somebody, just say, well, this is what I felt like. It's that kind of a system for self-help. And then working, like Jodi had said, we're working on this legislative thing, is getting more people involved in that and making it aware but also working with the families, because you have families that come into the situation, you have loved ones, say you have a survivor that comes out and they don't know how to deal in interpersonal relationships, so they don't know how to explain to their spouse, hey, this is what happened to me. Their spouse will also be able to, we want to make literature and reading materials on what their spouses are going through so they can communicate with them. It's kind of like, when you have somebody that has cancer and they have books out there, there's self-help and support groups for my wife has cancer that the husband can read, or my husband has prostate cancer that the wife can read so they can study the emotional aspects. Putting little booklets, self-help things together so we can not just bring the survivor in, but also bring the people that they want to make their support system into the picture, because it's really hard to understand. Luckily, in my instance, I have a really good sister-in-law that is very empathetic and understanding. And it doesn't. There's this their church very much condemns this type of behavior and conduct, and she's been real supportive, where a lot of people don't have that, and it isolates their whole external environment because they don't understand. And then it makes the relationship hard. Well, if we have these materials available, we can do that. And that's one of our goals, too, to work on, is creating a resource and a library of resource tools that we can provide to people. What we're also doing to help fund that is we're starting to get involved in grant writing and requesting assistance with some of these things, because it takes money to help survivors.
I know that I remember a few years ago when the Catholic Church sex scandals came out, there were calls for prosecutions, and I think in many instances, there had been some chatter. I think there had at least been some chatter about regulating what a lot of these priests should be doing and whatnot. But I think one of the biggest problems was the Vatican being the purveyor of a lot of these types of abuses that goes on in the church when it comes to little kids. And I guess the thing is that when you have this sort of widespread abuse going on, particularly when you have an organization like the Catholic Church, for instance, as an example, it really makes the Catholic Church look really bad. Are there any homes that you know of that have any ties and affiliations with the Catholic Church, or
occurs in the Catholic faith, but also the Christian faith, the independent fundamental, the Mormon, and regular facilities as well that don't have any religion associated with them. I think the biggest thing is the cover-up. You look at the cover-up that just happened with Sandusky and that whole thing. It's the cover-up that perpetuates the abuse and allows the abuse to continue. So if these people are required by law to report this type of abuse, then it just wouldn't happen, But that cover-up allows that blanket so that these abusers can abuse.
Right. Well, what's really interesting, what's really shameful is when you've got some conservatives or some people, and I'm not saying all conservatives feel this way, but some of them would say, well, the widespread pedophilia in the Catholic Church, for instance, is because of homosexuality. I think that's a very big stretch to blame one group, the sexual orientation.
Huge stretch, yeah.
Yeah, with what's going on with abuse. That's ridiculous.
Absolutely.
I mean, and, you know, that's like saying, well, that's like saying all Christians are basically wanting to impose Sharia law on women or selling them off to slavery. I mean, even if it's in their Bible, so the whole point is it's a very big stretch, and not all people feel that way. But there has to be a great deal of accountability, and I think this is where there's an epic fail by the churches and within the Baptist organizations that really fail to do something about this.
Well, I just don't think it's that. I think it's across the board, any religion, really. You know, Mormonism, right. You know, Catholics or Christians or fundamentalists or, you know, any organization that perpetuates that cover-up, even in a public, non-religious setup, you know, they don't report it. That allows the abuse to continue and to multiply. And, you know, we need to make sure, you know, as a society that we're out there and we're reporting this abuse and we're standing up for our children. We can make a difference. Each individual can make a difference. If they see anything that constitutes abuse, they need to speak up and report it, whether they're in management or they're, you know, a priest or they're a pastor. They need to stand up and speak out for these children who are being abused.
Now, there's been talk, and I think, Dawn, you were telling me about this, but there's been talk of you guys going on 2020. And
there actually was a show on 2020. I thought I'd emailed you a link a while back on 2020.
You probably
yes.
did. Yeah, you probably did.
On back on the church note, I did want to tell you that I actually have met some and been in a couple fundamentalist Baptist churches since then, because my grandmother came to stay with me, and I found them to be totally against and not supportive of the private organizations that do this. So that gave me at least an affirmation that it does not exist in all churches, because at one time I had thought it did, but that was only because of the circumstances I was involved in with my mother. And that's where the misconception is on that. Unless you don't see it, you don't know.
Right.
And it's almost like, you know, this warped sense of their religion has clouded their judgment, it seems, you know. And to me, I feel like, and I go to church. I go to a non-denominational church, and I am very supported by my pastor, and they do not condone this type of abuse. And you know, a lot of the scope of this abuse is, again, it's not just religious, but, you know, across the board. And I believe that, you know, there's a handful of these churches that do condone this and sweep it under the carpet. And that's a shame, because it just makes the rest of them look bad, you know?
Is there a widespread ignoring of these types of abuses across the board that run the gamut by the mainstream media? It seems like there's been, I mean, other than 2020, it seems like this is a subject that's been pretty much widely sort of, you know, pushed to the side or shelved or not even investigated even further.
Oh, yes, I truly believe that. And I believe part of the reason for that is because it takes a long time for the survivor to understand what has happened to them, to address the situation. And so in order to talk to the mainstream media or whatever, they want to know about the people that were abused, you know, 6 months ago, 4 months ago, so that they can get prosecutions, they can get justice. And because, people are coming forward 10 years later, they're like, well, I don't know if this is newsworthy, and that is true. I've heard that time and time again from reporters that have contacted me, and they want a newsworthy story. However, I will say that Anderson Cooper did a report on the Hesla House, which is a home that has been known to be abusive, and they actually did a very good report on that. I think it was like a 4-part series of it. And 2020, the news is out there if you know where to look, but the problem is it's not out there enough. That's the problem.
Would you care to comment even more on that, Dawn?
No, I think Jodi pretty much covered it. It's out there. It's just that it's old news. It's yesterday's news.
Well, and not only that, you have to keep in mind that this is a $1 billion industry. So there's a lot of cover-up being done, and nobody exactly. Moneypenny on the chat room said you have to look for the report to hear it, and so
right.
It's about, a lot of it is about money, and lining the pockets of these politicians and whatnot. And unfortunately, that's where we are today in society.
And we know how media works with politicians. It's a lot of things are censored too.
Oh yeah.
If they're afraid they're going to lose their viewers because their viewers support a lot of political entities that have money, they lose ratings, they lose money. So let's not cover the story because it can be shoved under the carpet a lot easier and we won't lose anything.
Well, and it's just a very sensitive topic, and it's ugly. It's ugly that we're allowing this abuse to be perpetuated against our children, internationally. It's not just in the United States, but
right.
Internationally. And I was watching this documentary, and it was talking about in our brain, we only want to process things that look good and pretty. And when we see something ugly, we don't want to acknowledge it because it's just too harsh of a reality for us. I think that's kind of what's happening.
What's been the attitude, and I'm glad Moneypenny brought this up because she writes that this is a Republican religious right issue. What's been the attitude of the grand old party, a.k.a. the Republican Party, on this particular issue, this problem, which is as pervasive as it is?
Well, if you look at the bill that was introduced in 2011, it was stalled in the Senate, and it was stalled by the Republicans. And, Republicans are very conservative in their views and right-wing, and so they feel like this is a state issue, not a federal issue, and they're holding fast to that. Not one Republican right now is supporting either one of these bills that are in play.
One of the biggest problems I have with Republicans is that they really say that they care about family values, about protecting children, protecting children from, say, violent content or content of a sexual nature.
Mm-hmm.
Especially when we're dealing with, say, the FCC or anything that's nudity. They want to ban pornography. They want to outlaw gay marriage. But when it comes to this kind of issue, sorry, this is not our big issue.
Well, it's kind of like what's done in secret stays in secret, on the outside, we want the world to see our pretty little suit and our pretty little tie and our pretty little dress, but on the inside, nobody knows what we're thinking or feeling, and we can play this pretty little game, and that's kind of, and I wanted to say specifically that for me, it's not a Republican, liberal, Democrat issue, it's a human issue. These are our children. These are our children that we need to protect. It's a human issue.
Oh, I agree, but they try to make it out to be a left versus right issue.
Unfortunately, that's true, and I wish it wasn't that. Unfortunately, it seems like it's Democrats versus Republicans, and the Democrats are wanting to see this go through, and the Republicans, for whatever reason, are stalling it.
Right.
That's true. That's what's sad.
I guess right now, what's been so far? Do you guys have like any plans for, say, do you guys have like say a YouTube site for anybody to go to, a site other than your website?
Yes, we do. If you go to YouTube and Google either survivors of, or put in the search bar survivors of institutional abuse or SIA network, SIA network, you'll find our YouTube page.
And I also understand that you're also on Facebook too as well.
Yes, we do have a Facebook page. If you just do a search on SIA Organization, you'll find it. And we also have a Twitter, and that's at SIA Organization.
What about, so I guess right now, I take it you guys are all pumped up and stoked and excited about the upcoming convention. Exactly what do you think are going to be the highlights of the upcoming convention, if you want to share some?
Well, for me, it's just gathering of the survivors. It's going to be huge for me, just being with like-minded people who understand, what I've been through. It's just such a comfort to interact with the survivors and just know that they know what I've been through. It's healing, very healing. But the highlights for me have to be the discussion panel. That's going to happen on Friday night. And then also, of course, I'm looking forward to all the speakers we have. We just have a phenomenal lineup. But the dedication ceremony is going to be huge, and that's where we're going to take a moment and remember those who have been lost in these places. And, you're talking about many, many, many children who have died, and then also adults who have died through either, murder or suicide. And it's just such a tragic thing. The convention is dedicated to a dear friend of mine who lost her life. She took her own life last year. Her name was Michelle Erkelson, and she wrote a book called...
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
Thank you. She wrote a book called Reform at Victory, which was about the facility that I was at, and she was an advocate before there was advocates. And she led the charge for a number of years all on her own. And she was out there on the web, when it wasn't even a thought in my head. And there's so many out there like that who have dedicated their time and their energy to advocate for stopping institutional child abuse. And we just want to recognize people like Michelle Erkelson who, she led a good fight and in the end ended up taking her own life because it was just too much. It was just, I just get so emotional when I talk about it because she was a dear friend. And I just really appreciate everything that she did and actually bringing me to the place of healing that I'm at today was very much because of her and those like her. I want to also mention that the place that I was at, the facility that I was at in San Diego, was raided and shut down by the FBI, but the only way that ever could have happened was there was a death at the school. There was a 14-year-old girl that was killed because she was doing heavy labor building a church for this facility, and drywall fell on her, and she was killed, and there was an investigation that was done. And through that investigation began the actual, it took 2 years for that to all happen, but there was a 17-year-old girl that was in the facility that took it upon herself and said, I am going to do whatever it takes to get this place shut down. And she went and shared her story to whoever would listen. She went on talk shows. She ended up on a public broadcast station, and she shared her story. And the host of that public broadcast show taped it, and he actually sent the recording of her testimony to the FBI. And through a little bit of pushing, the FBI then investigated and found the death, and then interviewed all the people that were at the facility, and it was closed down in February of 1991. So the reason why I say that is because I want those that out there that are listening to know that one person can make a difference. If you have a passion and you believe that this should not be happening, then you can make a difference. You can contact your congressman. You can call Child Protective Services. You can share your story. There's so many things that you can do to stop this type of abuse. And so I just felt the urge to share that because it's just so important. There's so many hardworking people out there for free dedicating their services so that this type of abuse hopefully in the future will not happen. And I also wanted to mention that on Facebook there is several survivor groups that are out there for the different various facilities. So if you were abused in a facility, I would recommend doing a search on Facebook to see if you can find other individuals that were in the same facility as you to share support and gain in healing. I mean, I could sit here and name off all of them, but there's just so many, so many, and there's so many advocates out there that are working toward getting this to stop.
They could also email at SIA, and one of us would help them find a support group for their specific home if there's one.
Absolutely, yes. You can contact us at any time. You can contact me. My email is sia.jodi, Jodi, @gmail.com. Anytime. And also, there's a phone number and email, on our website, sia-now.org.
Is there no? You said the phone number. Is that a toll-free number?
It is. And it's
Okay.
a toll-free number. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now, that brings me to a couple of other questions before we go here. I guess you were mentioning this discussion panel that you're going to have at the convention. Actually, this is a two-part question. One, is it going to be taped for like, say, recorded for people to see on YouTube if they don't make it to that particular discussion? And the other side of that question is, will it also involve a Q&A session as well?
Yes and yes. Both of those are yes. We are going to record it, and we're trying to work out where we have an actual live feed, and we'll see if that works out or not. But we will definitely have filming, and there will be a Q&A time.
Okay. And finally, the last question I have for both of you women, I guess is, these particular homes that are these. I'm not sorry, not homes, but these particular groups. Are there any other, say, competing survivor groups like yours that you guys are partnering with or planning to partner with? Or
that's a really good question. There actually is other advocacy groups out there. CAFETY is one, KAFETY, and there's also one called HEAL, HEAL, and the We Network, which Moneypenny mentioned. There's several of them out there. We specialize in promoting healing for survivors and raising awareness. That is our specialty. That's what we focus on. We do answer and field questions for those who have children in the homes currently and they want to get them out. We do have outreach with other organizations that will help us with counseling needs, lawyer needs, that kind of thing. So we are very much in support of all of these organizations that just do a phenomenal job in helping those who have been hurt or abused as children.
Right.
Yes, we also work with SNAP is wanting to help also, which is the Survivors Network for those that were abused by priests.
Yeah, and they're a great organization as well. There's several. I'm sure I'm missing one.
There's so many.
Restoring Dignity is another one that's based out of Canada.
A big laundry list.
Oh, yes.
Yes.
But, it seems like we all do specific things, and so it just seems like we're the right fit for, specific things. Like our focus is on specifically survivors and raising awareness, where HEAL is for advocating for children and rescuing children and actually listing the abusive facilities and that kind of thing. And CAFID is, they have, if I were to describe them, I would think of them as kind of a think tank where they're gathering the information and really trying to reach out for a solution. And Restoring Dignity is another organization very similar to ours based out of Canada. And SNAP, of course, they actually offer, abuse resources for not only those who have been abused by priests, but just anybody who has been abused in general. So we work with them. And there's children's rights organizations, Just Detention. There's just several of them that we've been able to glean resources from, and we're just so appreciative that they're out there.
Well, there's a bonus question. I heard recently that you guys appeared on the Mark Levin show. How did that go for you?
It went great. Mark Levin is a huge supporter. Like I said, he's going to be at the convention. And he's a huge advocate for getting the word out there and saying it like it is. He doesn't mince words, and he's a political analyst, so he knows the politics and kind of how to maneuver through those. So we're just so happy to have him as a support for us.
Wow.
And happy you had us, Todd.
Absolutely.
Thank you. No problem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, that's pretty much. I'm sure he is, Moneypenny. Thank you both so much for being on the show. The podcast will be up. Thank you, Wi-Fi guy. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Before we go, do you have any final thoughts or comments you want to say, Jodi and Dawn, before we part?
I do have one thing to say. You can make a difference. One person can make a difference, and if we unite with one voice, we can make a difference. And we're with you. We're there to support you, whatever your need is. And we hope that we'll see you at the convention. And thank you so much, Todd, for having us on and giving us this platform to share our organization and what we're about, and of course, this type of abuse and how we want it to stop.
Oh, no problem.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep, no problem. Thank you so much, guys. Take it easy, and good night, folks. Thank you.
Night.
Thank you.